Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis for 23rd February 2024. And before we begin looking at today's important news articles, here's an exciting announcement for you. Now, 25th February, 11 a.m., we shall be conducting a scholarship test. So it helps you two ways. One, it will help you in analyzing your performance, your preparation. Second, if you get good score in this exam, you shall be entitled to about 90%, that is up to 19% off on your course fee on various programs. So this could be the golden opportunity. Do register for the test today because the registrations will close 6 a.m. 25th February, that is a Sunday. And now let's proceed by analyzing today's important news articles. We have here a set of 3 articles that are relevant for UPSC Mains, whereas 3 short factual articles have been picked up from the point of view of prelims exam. So let us begin with the very first article itself that has been picked up from page number 11. The Hindu, today's publication, New Delhi edition. The article talks about how ASHA workers in India, now ASHA, that stands for Accredited Social Healthcare Activists. The reason why we call them activist is for a purpose. And the purpose is that these people are often referred to as the last mile health soldiers of India. Particularly in rural India, where they act as a bridge between the economically deprived segments of society on the one hand and community health on the other. So these people are the ones who enable access of the rural poor towards health services across various primary health centers. They counsel and advise them for taking secondary and tertiary health services as well. So as an integral part of India's health system, these ASHA workers today, unfortunately, are experiencing a very dismal scenario. Now, generally, these are women group of workers, and we often refer to them as community workers. Now, let's not get confused between ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, and the primary health nurses. When we talk about ASHA workers, their role is much more multifaceted as compared to other community workers in India. And these people today sadly are experiencing overstrain, that is a lot of work pressure. Apart from that, they are experiencing something which this article calls as economic violence. Now, violence is a very common word, but essentially it means when you violate somebody's rights and entitlements. This is exactly what the article talks about. Neither are they experiencing physical, emotional, psychological violence. They are also experiencing economic violence. Apart from that, these are also people, therefore, who have constantly been demanding from the government certain rights, certain entitlements for the betterment of their situation. But very few steps have been taken really. So this article here basically talks about the various problems that are confronting our ASHA workers, what can be done to remove those problems, what is the importance of these people in our healthcare spectrum. So therefore, the key highlights of the article are that ASHA workers today are experiencing a double, in fact a triple burden. Before we understand what is this triple burden, let's understand that ASHA workers are a set of community workers who were introduced in India as a part of National Rural Health Mission. Initially, the scheme was initiated back in 2005, as I said, to work as the last mile workers. What are the important duties that they perform? Over the years, their duties have only enlarged. For example, if you say that India has a very high maternal mortality, child mortality and infant mortality rate, it is the ASHA workers with whose contribution these rates have still become way more declined in the previous few decades, because it is these women who are often referred to as friends of women, who are often referred to with lovely local colloquial names like Didi, Saheli, all of that. All these names connote that these people go door to door in rural communities. They convince women to actually have an institutional delivery in case they are pregnant. They tell these women to consume iron and folic acid supplements that are essential for a healthy pregnancy. They tell and they advocate family planning for women, safe family planning. They talk about menstrual hygiene. They talk about the importance of adolescent sanitation. They also provide basic apparatus such as during COVID-19 pandemic, gloves, masks and other preventive gadgets. They also provide counseling regarding clean consumption, clean water drinking habits, and apart from that also children vaccination. Hence, they play a very, very broad role when it comes to preventive as well as curative health in India. Now, having said that, if this is the amount of efforts that they are putting in, what are they getting in return? So today, unfortunately, these workers are confronting a very paradoxical situation as per this article. What is this paradoxical situation? Now, they are caught up in two kind of problems. The first problem is the triple burden that they are experiencing. The triple burden comes from, now let's remember, most of these ASHA workers are young women from the age group of typically, say about 20 to 45 years. Most of them are married, some are widows, some are working mothers. And generally these hail from a background of society which is poor, which is very, very low middle class. Let's understand that the basic qualification to become an ASHA worker is being 10th or high school qualified, which means that once in job, there is a very minimal chance of these women to further take up higher education or higher skills. Some are still studying as they are working because monetary conditions compel them to do this work. But the problem is today, they are taking care of their families, that's one. Second, of course, they are performing their duty as the ASHA activist, that is another. Now, this duty is more than just a job. It is a full-time duty, and these women are available at just any short phone call or a summon from any rural woman who is undergoing a health distress. So it's a constant mobile job. Let's remember, the government has yet not provided any proper transportation, any logistical cost coverage, any safety equipment. For example, these women are working in monsoon season. They traverse through heat waves. They work in utter winter seasons in most of North India where the climate is very, very extreme around the year. And yet the government hasn't been providing them any particular safety gears as such or any transportation to take care of their additional expenses. So what happens, apart from the minimal salary that they earn, say about 4,000, 5,000 rupees, that's all. Apart from that, they are just dependent on any bonus, any further advance given to them by the government in case they are successful in undertaking an institutional delivery. If they are successful in a particular project, they are given some money. But that's just a very, very meager amount given the extra cost that they are incurring, which can be called as out-of-pocket expense. On their own logistical transport expenses, that's not taken care of. Now, the third burden comes from the fact that being constantly at work, plus the domestic burden, plus the economic poor return, these women are highly susceptible to a lifestyle that could tomorrow lead them to massive increase in non-communicable plus communicable diseases. For example, as per a survey done in one of the villages of Bihar, the article says that these women were reported to be getting very inadequate sleep, very, very poor nutrition. Sometimes they are the last ones to eat in their family. Sometimes they are at work all day without consuming anything. There is hardly an access to clean drinking water, in fact, even toilets while they are on the field. So this predisposes them to nutrition deficiencies such as anemia. Now, this is a paradox because most common complaint when we talk about women health in India is that 57% Indian women in the reproductive age, that is the childbearing age from 15 to typically 45, are experiencing chronic anemia. Now, these ASHA workers are the ones who help them. But on the other hand, these ASHA workers themselves are registering a very high case of anemia. That is a very low iron level and a very, very low folate level in their bodies, which means that their reproductive health is in danger. It means that even their work efficiency goes for a toss, given the hectic nature of job that they do actually. Apart from that, they are also therefore susceptible to many, many diseases. Now, Even there is no data which has accounted for how many ASHA workers were susceptible to COVID pandemic, because even during that period they were not getting any respite, they were constantly working. Now, having said that, only health problem is not something that they face. They face many other kinds of problems, and as per the articles, these problems can be clubbed into economic, poor salary, poor remuneration, cultural. Why cultural? Interesting, because these are also the women who typically hail from the marginalized segments of society. There was a survey done in Chhattisgarh which said that majority of ASHA workers, these women, come from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe communities. Lack of higher education, lack of STEM education, lack of employment opportunities explains why majority of women are coming from marginalized backgrounds. Now, if they come from marginalized backgrounds, it is pretty much presumable that they do experience some kind of caste disability as they go and communicate door to door with village people, because caste considerations and tribal considerations, these barriers, they are still pretty much active when you talk about a majority part of rural India. On that note, they are also experiencing gender-based violence. Now, this is something that's really a worrying trend. So, what typically are the microscopic problems that ASHA workers are facing? Now, in 2002, as per a study highlighted in this article, in Chhattisgarh, these ASHA workers are known as Mitanins. Mitanins were the people, the friends of women who symbolized care and love for poor deprived women. Eventually, the state of Chhattisgarh designated these people under the ASHA framework. Today, of course, they are about 10 lakh women who are working under ASHA scheme. Now, let's remember, they are working in a triple shift. We spoke about the triple burden. That is constant domestic burden, constant work in the community for the welfare of people, and apart from that, they also render extra services in primary health care centers in India. Now, let's remember that in India, there are primary health care centers which typically should be existing across, either shared between many villages or one per village block. And these are the centers where people will come for vaccination, reproductive health, or any first-hand diagnosis, that is primary health. In these centers also, there are ASHA workers who are employed, who are working alongside the staff, alongside Anganwadi workers to provide vaccinations and counseling. So they are caught up into 3 work domains together, and this is typically referred to as the time poverty trap. Time poverty trap is a situation which a woman experiences when she is experiencing a conflict between unpaid labor and paid labor. Paid labor, of course, is the job that she does. Here, in the case of ASHA workers, very poorly paid, about 4,000 to 5,000 only, that's all. Plus the unpaid labor that is expected from her, given the highly engendered nature of India's domestic labor, the fact that women still toil at home despite working outside. So, at the cross of both these happens time poverty, where ASHA workers then, in this case, are caught up in time poverty. They are poor on time. What time? Productive time, where they could have done some education, they could have done skill upgradation, they could have taken care of their nourishment, their own health care. It is abysmal to see that most of these women have not been screened for cervical cancer. Most of these women have not received any vaccination for cervical cancer, for pneumonia, for preventive diseases in India. So this is something that the article actually highlights, and the article also says that there is a very famous healthcare worker by the name of Dr. Amit Sengupta, and he has identified a study where he says that if these workers are not sleeping well, they are not eating well, plus they are constantly doing a hectic labor, then tomorrow they are the ones who will contract most of the diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, sometimes even certain kinds of unexplained cancers. Why? Because there is zero awareness about health and nourishment. So the stress factor automatically among these women is very, very high, and what we cannot ignore is also the psychological stressors that these women are constantly being subjected to. Now, it's shameful to see that some of them are victims of domestic violence back at home, despite being breadwinners. Some of them experience violence while traveling to take care of patients across villages. Some of them are subjected to eve teasing, molestation, groping. So this is the reality of an ASHA worker's life and reality. And when you talk about these triple burden that they experience, another very important question that the article raises is that why then is the government not ready to do anything dramatic to help them? Why are they suffering like that? So the answer to this question is very simple. I hope it triggers some memories in you. Back in our previous articles, we have spoken how majority of women in India who are working, they are always ghost employees. And here comes the problem, that these ASHA workers are working on a voluntary basis. Now let's remember, although they have been employed by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they should be government employees, but technically they are not that. Technically they are volunteers. They are not designated healthcare workers. So where are they? They are hidden somewhere when it comes to welfare policies, and hence somewhere they assume the shape of ghost employees. So they will do more work than a designated official, but when it comes to security and return, they will get very minimal, because the government has not yet identified the real magnitude of these women, how many people are in need. That is hidden. There is no, as such, data to support the problems that they face. So the paradox in the article is, ASHA workers provide care, but they are not taken care of by anybody in our community, whether it be government or an NGO or the community at large. Now let's also understand that it was just now in the 2024 interim budget that a revolutionary decision was taken, that ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers both will be provided healthcare insurance under PMJAY, that is the Ayushman Bharat scheme. This is a wonderful initiative. But there are more problems here. A majority of activists and social workers complain that although people are entitled to Ayushman Bharat scheme, there are leakages, There are always seepages. So whenever a welfare scheme does not perform well, whenever it is there on paper but it doesn't get manifested, we call this as welfare seepage. There are massive leakages and seepages in the system. There is red tapeism, there is bureaucracy, there is corruption. We say that poor people below poverty line, that is typically the bottom 50% of Indian population, is entitled to this largest government-sponsored healthcare scheme. But how many people are actually getting it? To even go and make a card is a challenge when you ask an individual targeted beneficiary. So in that case, most of the ASHA workers who are already experiencing time poverty, they are the ones who probably will not be able to take as much benefit of this scheme. Now, something more that the article talks about, which is a very disturbing case reality, is that why so far have these ASHA workers not been given benefits under the central government health scheme? Why? Why are they missing here? Now, what is this scheme? The scheme is an age-old scheme in India which had begun actually in 1954. The purpose was to provide good quality, accessible health care to government employees of the central government and various other departments and their dependents, their family members also. In that case, why ASHA workers never got a representation here? Is it because they are voluntary workers and not designated workers? Is it because they come from a class of workers that are ghost employees? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves, that recently we have done something more unfair to them. After COVID-19 pandemic, the work burden on them has surmounted. It has become way more immense. For example, earlier it was only about reproductive health, sanitation, and vaccination. Today you see what all it has become. Today it has become palliative care, taking care of people who are sick, who are experiencing, serious critical diseases, diseases with high mortality, terminal diseases. Apart from that, they are constantly doing follow-ups about vaccination of children and women. They are looking and reporting into cases of domestic violence despite being victims of the same at some point of time. And apart from that, they are also therefore doing a work that is providing mental health support to women in the rural community. Now that's a major contribution of these workers. And apart from that, it is very common to see an ASHA worker cycling to work in peak rainy season, in humidity and heat, becoming sick with heat stroke, because she probably herself cannot afford a proper transportation or better medical access. So these are certain paradoxes that the article talks about, that although traveling in all sorts of weather, traveling in a generally unsafe society is an occupational hazard. It is a workplace danger, but it is not qualified as one. For ASHA workers, again, because they are hidden workers, really, and apart from that, they are not considered a part of formal labor force, but they end up becoming a part of informal labor force. Once again, the same thing. Vulnerable nature of job. You are working, but you are invisible, and that's why you are not getting any social security. So these are certain things also that the article says, plus the article raises a voice about, on the low remuneration of ASHA workers. It says that, for example, family monthly income is about 5,000 to 15,000 for an average ASHA worker. For the beginners, barely 4 to 5,000. Sadly, this sometimes is the only family income that they can afford. So imagine what a precarious financial situation they are in. Apart from that, when you deny them a good salary for so much duties that they perform, the article calls it economic violence. Why something is not done? Now, we often talk about the pay commissions of the government, but all that has never been spoken about, never been contemplated in the case of ASHA workers. Now, similarly, as I said, they are constantly taking photocopies, they are doing transportation, they are traveling, mobile charges. Who pays for all that? So all these logistical costs are additional financial burdens on ASHA workers. And the fact that they do not themselves have a proper access to the primary healthcare centers, at least free access. So that is something also that the article is raising a voice against. And as I said, because in general, rural society still has many elements of patriarchy, sometimes ASHA workers are working very closely with panchayats. Again, these are male-dominated bodies. So sometimes they do experience the kind of gender-based implicit and explicit violence. Implicit is very indirect, explicit is physical or verbal, direct, felt, tangible. So they are also subject to that. So themselves, we have somewhere made them a marginalized community, and this is when the situation is that a recent global public health survey about India said that when ASHA workers are in touch with a rural woman who's pregnant, 1.6 times the chances increase that she will have an institutional birth. Despite this massive contribution, today we have these ASHA workers who are not in a very good situation themselves. So that's what the article says. A very good initiative that we can take is to promote education for ASHA workers. Now, even if they are working in the ASHA team, let them get free, subsidized, proper skill upgradation. Let them take up higher education. Or otherwise, you could also slightly increase the criteria for recruitment into ASHA work team. That will also help and motivate many other women to study further. Then digitization. They need to be touched with digitization. So for all the efforts that they do, digitization, logistical cost of transport, free communication, free mobile, you can say recharges or free data. These could enable them not only to work better, but to have a remarkably better life. So therefore, what we should believe in that if they are seen as warriors, let the system not unacknowledge them, but actually heed to their problems, because they can provide a major boost in the arm to India's overall healthcare system. Imagine in a scenario where even today we are spending less than 2.5% of our GDP on healthcare. So these could be a very, very good alternative here. And on that note, let's move on to the next article of the day, taken for you from page number 12 pertaining to the international relations. And this is a voice against misuse of international organizations being done by powerful nations, autocrats, dictator, genre of rulers in order to take their own political benefits. So in this case, the organization being spoken about is Interpol, one of the largest international police organizations that helps in combating transnational crimes. Created long back in 1923. This has worked to facilitate cooperation among various nations when it comes to combating various kinds of crime, typically terrorism, cybercrime, as well as organized crime. So here, when we talk about Interpol, reports are saying that Interpol is being misused, and not today, it has been misused for a very, very long time now. By who? By leaders of various countries who have military intentions, by leaders of few countries which are very aggressive in their foreign policies. So let's break down the article step by step. What are the key highlights of this article here? The key highlights of the article are: 1. Let's talk about Interpol for a second. Now, Interpol is international group, rather a police network, an organization that stands for International Criminal Police Organization, as I said, created back in 1923, that works in broadly 3 areas of combating international, transnational crime. Now these areas, as I said, are cybercrime, terrorism, terror financing. Apart from that, organized crime. It does include narcotics, child pornography, smuggling, and all of these activities together. So if this is one of the largest worldwide police cooperation meant for crime control, and it has members more than 194 total today, it should then play a very critical role in helping countries solve transnational crime, especially in a time like today where cyber crimes and phishing are on the rise. There are groups that are virtually all the time, practically on a full-time basis, engaged in attacking through cyber basis various healthcare apparatuses, various security organizations across the world. Today, living in a time where countries are engaged in geopolitical conflicts, there is terrorism going on in full swing. So it is this time where Interpol should play a very positive role by enabling various countries to come together and coordinate their policies in order to track and combat these crimes. Then what's the problem? Now the problem is that concerns have been raised that Interpol is being used as a personal weapon by many nations. How? Now let's remember that Interpol works under certain fixed protocols, and one of the protocols is that Interpol, it issues certain notices. These notices are also graded in terms of color. So you have the blue color notice, or you have the red corner notice, you have the orange corner notice, the purple corner notice, and many of these kinds. Every notice code color is for a particular purpose. Now typically the article talks about the red and the blue corner notices. The article says that Interpol has been used by various political leaders to constantly issue blue corner notice. Very, very commonly. Just because they have a target in mind. Say for example, if somebody is opposing a country's policies. Now this is more particularly common with certain countries, such as when you talk about UAE, Venezuela, you talk about Russia, China. Now these are certain countries which have typically been blamed for issuing many blue corner and red corner notices at an unprecedented rate whenever somebody is standing against their policies. Now yesterday you must have read that all over the newspaper we are talking about criticism against the action of Russian government. They are saying that Russian dictatorship has exceeded its limits because there has been an individual who has been murdered, who has been killed in the Russian prison, and people say that this is again a very hideous act of killing somebody who was raising a voice of dissent because he was an opponent of the government, a perceived opponent at least. So in that note, let's remember that countries have been exploiting these corner notices constantly by forcing Interpol to issue it to their opponents and not to people who are genuine criminals. So in that light, let's understand the two important corner notices that the article talks about. So among various red, yellow, blue, black, green, purple, orange notices, talking about blue notice. Blue notice is more or less a precursor to red notice. Blue notice is issued to just get information about an individual who is considered a criminal or somebody who has done something that is to be pointed out by the Interpol, his identity, her identity, location, and activities that are related to a crime done by this person, this targeted person. So blue notice is more of a verification. It is more of an information receiving platform. Talking about how in 2020, Interpol also had issued a blue corner notice to very famous absconding India's self-styled godman Nityananda Swami. Much later, it was also issued in the case of Nirav Modi, in the case of financial crime involved. So blue notices have often been issued in case where Interpol needs the concerned government to send and share all the details regarding identity, background and situation, location of these people. But it is slightly different from red corner notice because red corner notice is more of a action taking mechanism. Under red notice, the Interpol seeks now the location of the person who is being considered the criminal, and it then tries to proceed with arresting that person. It is about imprisoning that person, prosecuting that person for the crime that he or she is being held for. So it is often used to arrest a wanted criminal by a member state. Sometimes there is a criminal who has defaulted a particular country but the person is living in another country. He or she has absconded. Now this country can use Interpol for extradition because the person should be charged in the country against which the crime has been done. So all these activities are done under the red notice, but therefore we say that blue corner notice is almost like the first step. First you identify and then you issue the red notice to finally prosecute and carry forward your arrest. So although the paradox that the article talks about, the problem is that although Interpol's constitution, it completely prohibits, it forbids that Interpol should not be used for activities that have a political character or which are related to the local, national politics of a given country. That Interpol will not indulge in, but despite that, constantly, since the 2000s, Interpol has been abused and so many notices have been issued to wanted people in connection with some political problem, not in the nature of transnational crime. Say, for example, according to a US rights organization, 38% of all the public red notices have been issued by Russia. That's a huge number. Similarly, let's remember that whenever we talk about this abuse of Interpol protocol, we are reminded of 2014 incident. Now, during 2014, it was believed that Ukrainian nationalist and paramilitary leader named as Dmytro Yorosh was actually summoned by Interpol. He was actually placed on Interpol's internationally wanted list. Why? On the request and compulsion created by Russia on the Interpol. So he, therefore, in fact became the first person who became an internationally wanted criminal to be searched through Interpol post the initiation of the conflicts that was going on between Russia and its annexed territories. So whenever Russia was experiencing that kind of a border violence, he therefore became the person on Russia's request who became an internationally wanted criminal. So this was something that was pointed out, that it was because of Russia's political motive that Interpol was used as an agency. Similarly, talking about back in 2021, countries like Turkey, China, countries like even Russia, Venezuela and UAE have been blamed for the same kind of an action. Now let's remember China. In that case, let's also remember how China, as said by various activists, international human rights activists, has been engaged in abusing Interpol protocols to issue notices to Uyghur Muslim community members. Now let's remember, we all know about China's antagonistic policies towards the ethnic minority of Uyghur Muslims. So in that case, China has often got Interpol notices issued to those Uyghur ethnic Muslim minority members who are living abroad, but from there they are coordinating policies in support of the people who are still living in China. So often these people were targeted deliberately by China through Interpol. Similarly, people have also said that many times refugees were included in the list of Interpol, not for a crime, but they were arrested just for crossing borders. Similarly, in 2008, there was a very interesting, a very shocking revelation made by United Nations Commissioner for Refugees. It said that refugees across the world are getting trapped in controversies because of being issued notice, because of being caught and identified under Interpol rules. In reality, they were only refugees who were just migrating and they were not typically involved in any crime in any country. So these are certain things that the article also talks about, and the article also says that blue notices are more indiscriminately issued. They are more subject to abuse because they are hardly even reviewed. Just on the prodding by a country, they are issued quite easily, and therefore the sheer number of blue corner notices being issued to various institutions, various people have just doubled in just previous 10 years. So hence, there are countries like Turkey who have put up a very interesting debate. So whenever international rights activists say that Interpol should stop issuing notices just because various countries are pressurizing it. Turkey has a very interesting counter-argument. Turkey says that if Interpol stops issuing the notice, or if it thinks too much before issuing notice, if there is a more difficult legislation to be followed, a more difficult protocol before the notice can be issued, it would lead to lack of international cooperation when it comes to curbing international terrorism. And hence, Western countries should not interfere in the internal affairs of countries like Turkey, like China, like UAE, like Venezuela. So they have often blamed this attitude towards Western hegemony. And hence the article talks about how a better coordinated policy, a much more transparent issuing of notices, much more transparent operation in international agencies could mean a better, fair and a more cooperative society globally. And now proceeding with an article from page number 10 that is in connection with security, and we are talking about the Agniveer or the Agnipath scheme. Now the main agenda of this article is not to indiscriminately criticize the Agnipath scheme. In fact, it is giving a very counterbalancing argument. On the one hand, it has pointed out certain deficiencies with this initiative, which started back in 2022. On the other hand, it has also given certain points in support of the initiative. But the whole point that the article is trying to moot is that Agniveer scheme is a scheme that is just taking care of structural change in India's defense industry, in India's defense domain. The structural change is a very, very artificial change. But in reality, the Agnipath scheme doesn't seem to be doing much in creating an institutional change. What's the difference? Now, when we talk about institutional change, we are talking about a much deeper change. A change that is a change of values. A change that is a change of emotions. These are certain things that are missing when we talk about the Agnipath scheme. But definitely it is taking care of certain structural requirements. So now let's come to the article. Let's quickly see what are the main points highlighted in the article here. So the article begins first by saying that what is the importance of the Agnipath scheme. It was rolled out in June 14, 2022, and the intention was that young men and women, typically from the age of, say, initially it was 17.5 to about early 20s, and then later it was expanded and it became 21 leading up to 23. So people among this age group, both girls and boys, now they will be recruited into the armed forces. All three units of the armed forces, Navy, Air Force and we can talk about the military, and they will be recruited for a particular period. They will just be recruited for, say, about 4 years. Not on a permanent basis, on a very contractual temporary basis. Now, in these 4 years, they will receive a 6 months period of purely training, and the remaining 3.5 years will be the proper duty time. And therefore, the Agnipath scheme is often also referred to as tour of duty scheme. It is almost like a short tour to your duty in the military. Now, what happens after the 4 years? After the 4 years, the people will be exiting the army, but not all of them. Say about 25% of them will be retained for a longer period. The remaining shall have to exit. Now, recently there has been a debate that this 25% will probably soon be increased to 50% officially. So, which means 50% people almost to be recruited, to be kept there, retained, and the remaining 50% they have to exit. But it's not like they will exit without anything. They will exit, although they will not receive a pension, but at the end of their 4-year period, before they leave, they will get an amount of about 11.7 lakh rupees lump sum. That will take care of their expenses until they resettle in another career. Plus, they also have an opportunity to once again apply through proper channel, conventional channel, into the military force. So this is broadly the scheme that was spoken about. Why suddenly did the government decide upon this scheme? It is clearly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, during 2019, for a period of about 3 years, there was hardly any or no recruitment that was done at the soldier level, at the short service level in the army. That is below the cadet officers, below the commissioned officers. There was hardly any recruitment that happened for about 3 years. Why? Because COVID-19 pandemic was the reason given by the government. However, every year about 50 to 60,000 people were retiring. So that left behind a vacuum. That left behind a big gap in the military services. And hence the government came up with this idea that let's have a short service manpower model in which you hire people on a contractual basis, and then eventually once they have rendered the service, once the gap is filled, then they can be released, they can be relieved, but with some money at hand. So this is the typical model of Agnipath scheme that we speak about, but constantly the scheme has been criticized by the opposition parties, also by certain social activists. The main reason behind criticism is that people believe that when you are allowing people to come to military service on a contractual basis, you are in a way giving an impression that military service is a job like any other job. In reality, it should not be seen as a job or an employment. It is something much bigger. It is a commitment towards your country. And therefore, this scheme is just degrading the purity. It is degrading the intent of military service. Secondly, they also believe that it is rather exploitative because it is happening on a contractual basis, so which means that people as such will have a huge break in their career and they will not get any assured career on a long-term basis. Now, the military service that was once associated with pension benefits, honor, lifetime security of a government job will all be denied to people now. So the motivation of joining government forces will come down. All these were reasons that the opposition parties and social workers gave. But the government feels that in a country as vast as India, where there is tremendous manpower and yet high level of unemployment, to criticize a scheme like this is only going to do something more negative. Even if it's contractual, it is not only providing employment, a productive employment to people, it is giving them a chance to serve their country. It is propagating a sense of nationalism and patriotism among the youth. Apart from that, it is also therefore giving them a corpus fund of certain lakh rupees once they get relieved, with which either they can initiate a business or with which they can take up another employment opportunity, they can go for skill upgradation, or they can apply back to the military service. They don't see anything wrong in that. So these are the typical debates around the scheme. Now the article says something slightly different. The article says that when you launch a scheme like this, you feel that if you take these new youth, you recruit them and they will undergo excellent, very hard military training. They will learn how to use various weaponry, artillery. You can make them into excellent military unit. There is no doubt about that. But there is something missing. The fact that these people are coming out from outside, and the fact that these people will then have to assimilate with people who are coming through conventional route. Plus, they are there temporarily. They are not there permanently for a lifetime. Very few will remain, most will go out. There are two problems here. One problem is that since they are here on a temporary basis, these people will never be able to assimilate properly among their peers, among their counterparts, other soldiers. That's a problem. Which means there will be a lack of unity that shall remain. There will be a coherence that shall continue to exist. Which means until they have a team spirit, they cannot accomplish much, because military is not just about learning how to use weapons. It's not just about undergoing physical training. It is also about your emotional, psychological build-up. You have to have a sense of belonging if you need to serve your country. Plus, the article also argues that if you interview any ex-officer or any ex-soldier from the military or currently serving ones, they will always tell you that team spirit is the most important sentiment here. Even during the times of war, it is the spirit of team that enables people to stay together and to stay motivated. They cannot operate without a proper network, and this will be absent in case people are taken on a short-term basis. The second argument the article makes is that since only half people will be left behind and half will go, it will create an intra-competitive spirit among these newly recruited soldiers. Now, intra-competitive means among themselves they will have a kind of competition going out, just to be the best, just to be staying behind, to not get relieved and to not get, exited. So because of this, what happens, it further breaks down or fragments the unity spirit that is critical to any success of the armed forces. And hence, whether you talk about a national sentiment of a team player of football or cricket, or whether you talk about a team of doctors who are taking care of a sick patient, or whether you talk about a group of soldiers, until they have the psychology and motivation of a team, of a group, the article has termed this as solidarity, a social economic word which means a spirit of cohesion among people. So unless we maintain this camaraderie, friendship ties, bonhomie and solidarity, soldiers will not get strength. So the human element might be missing in the entire scheme. Although structurally it's a good initiative in terms of employment, in terms of boosting the manpower in defense services, in terms of the fact that young people will get state-of-the-art training. But the problem is, what about the spirit of unity? What about the psychological attachment to the job that you do? Now that is something that may be missing in a scheme that is very superficial and temporary. That's what the article talks about. The article also says that technological advancements always do not guarantee victory in a war. If it was so easy to win a war only on the basis of technical advancement, then probably many nations across the world would not have won wars despite being weak in terms of military strength, technical strength as compared to their opponents. So ultimately it's your emotion and it's your value-based training that you get that eventually matters. The article calls this as unit ethos. So the article also says that the leaders, the people who will train these young recruits, should not only train them in terms of hardware training, in terms of physical repertoire, but they should also train them in terms of developing skills which are interpersonal in nature. Excellent interpersonal skills, excellent intercommunication skills. All of this is the emotional intelligence quotient that we are talking about. So you cannot miss emotional intelligence when you talk about people who serve in the military. That's what the article says. And it also says that, therefore, the challenge is that while you recruit them, please do not only have a physical examination, please have a test of psychology, a psychometric test regarding how motivated are these people, regarding what kind of emotional intelligence do they carry. Because even to use a technological weapon, what you actually need is emotional intelligence. Why are you using it? Is it ethical to use it? Are you willing to do anything for your country? So these things are more of emotional intelligence than just, you can say, artificial intelligence or something that, enables you a better technological digital structure. That is something very external. Internally, it boils down to the mindset, and that is something that we need to cultivate and groom our soldiers in. If we are able to do that, it will be a successful scheme, but until that is assured, there will always be some loopholes. And on that note, here's an article coming for Prelims, International Relations, and it has been coming in the light of the ongoing Raisina dialogue in New Delhi right now. And here we realize that India is soon going to open a diplomatic mission in Albanian capital of Tirana. The article says that as Albania's foreign minister, Mr. Hassani, who is visiting India to participate in the Raisina dialogue, which is the annual geopolitical, geo-economic dialogue initiated by India, and which sees participation from various foreign ministries, NGOs, think tanks, researchers, policy makers. So it is during this important event that the Albanian leader said that this is a very, very important juncture for starting a new chapter of relations between India and Albania. Now, recently we saw that India not only has been consolidating its ties with UAE, Saudi Arabia, even we are witnessing Qatar as well recently when the Navy controversy happened, and also now with French leadership. And today here we are talking about Albania and UK. Now, UK also is getting huge impetus as per the newspaper of today, that even India and UK have decided to further cooperate when it comes to strategic partnership and military cooperation, and same goes with Albania. Now, people say that Albania is almost like a corridor, being an Eastern European country that connects Europe with Asia. So it's a very critical player in the Eurasian region, and hence better ties, whether it be trade related or whether it be strategic, much bigger, they will help in creating a smoother inflow of technology, people, trade, culture from Asia to Europe. Therefore, around 500 kilometers coastline of Albania is actually the northern neighbor of Greece. Now, recently we saw, in fact, yesterday we covered how India and Greece are also trying to initiate a better dialogue towards enhanced trade, enhanced tourism, enhanced migration, plus military cooperation. We also spoke about the INCHIOS, the international exercise from Greece in which India also participated back in 2023. So in that light, India has already been building good relations with the countries of Eastern Europe. So Albania is the new partner in this regard. So let's remember, for connectivity projects, now specifically if you talk about the IMEC, the corridor that is being created between Europe, Middle East, connecting India. So that is something that Albanian leader once again gave importance to. He said that today Albania is a part of many corridors that are creating a link between India and European Union. So therefore, Albanian presence as a friendly partner for India will be important when India talks about not just a better India-EU partnership. Also, recently there has been a debate going on where India has been inking a pact with certain countries of Europe regarding medicine patenting. So in all these initiatives, countries of Eastern Europe have a very big role to play. Now, Albania is one of the fastest growing European economies. Let's remember that Albania's tourism sector is the main highlight of the relation between Albania and India as of now. So he said that in 2023, 10 million tourists has visited Albania, and hence smoother movement of people is one of the key agendas. People also said that Sanskrit and Albanian, they have many cultural roots among each other. So therefore, there is also a cultural historical tie that both the countries are sharing. Now, talking about the existing relationship, the relationship between the two countries began much early in 1990s when there was a diplomatic mission that was set up in each other's country by both India and Albania. Before that, it was very negligible. Now, bilateral trade, if we talk about the two-way trade between both the countries, it was about 68.20 million US dollars just in 2017-18. It did come down during the COVID pandemic, but once again, it is being bolstered. And back in 2012, let's remember there was a joint venture, India-Albania Trade Expo, that was held to further enhance the scope of outsourced job in India, where Indian businesses were willing to set up in Albania and ease of doing business was spoken about. Similarly, this expo that we are discussing from 2012, it became an international platform for about 300 Indian companies to go and trap the markets of Albania. That meant huge bilateral profits for both the countries and also employment opportunities that were being generated. Plus, both the countries have signed a double taxation avoidance agreement in 2013, further to promote ease of doing business and trade. In 2015, India and Albania, they decided to boost intra-cooperation with each other by Indian investment in the oil and the gas sector in Albania. So we know that the ties are already in place. This meeting will further only boost them ahead. A memorandum of collaboration, an MOC, has been signed in New Delhi, where Human Resource Development Minister and Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministers have also spoken about inking fresh deals. In 2018, the government of Albania awarded a contract to Indian-led India Power Cooperation to build Albania's first solar power station. So which means that the ties are progressing in a very remarkable manner. And on that note, page number 11, another quick snippet for prelims talks about science. Now this talks about a major global achievement. As per the reports of World Health Organization, a disease caused by a parasitic infection that was initially causing so many deaths back in 1980s. It was related to so many cases of deaths, critical illness among people in poor countries today. The world is almost free from that disease, and we are talking about a disease referred to as the Guinea worm disease, or the GWD. The Guinea worm disease is also known by another name that we shall discuss, and let's understand just briefly the nature of the disease. Let's understand how was the world able to come to a situation where in the 1980s the cases of Guinea worm disease in poor sub-Saharan African countries, particularly Mali, Sudan, Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, including southern Asian countries, even in certain pockets of India, it was so high that the diseases were actually in millions. talking about 2023, the total cases from millions has come down to 14. So what has led to this remarkable success in a world which is full of paradoxes? One big paradox, the article says, in 1960s, now clearly the article mentions that in 1960s, a period was that not only did humankind put its first step on moon, which meant a basic, big boost to space exploration. But look at the paradox. From then to now, we have prospered so much. We have come a long way when it comes to space exploration. But what about taking care of diseases? Although we successfully reached the moon, various countries, even private companies are now sending their missions. But when you talk about disease combating, there is barely one disease which we have been able to eliminate, and that's smallpox. So look at the paradox. In science and space, we have advanced so much. But in the same period, when it comes to medical problems, the world has not done enough. It was not able to do enough. It doesn't mean that the world is not capable enough or various governments are not capable. It is just because the nature of diseases, especially today's zoonotic, which travel between humans and animals. Zoonotic pandemics and epidemics have become very complex to be tackled. That's what the article says. Now, the article says it's a major victory today. That at least when you talk about the Guinea worm disease, also referred to as dracunculiasis. Now, that's a scientific name for it. This has today been literally abolished. As I said, from 1980s million cases to just 13 cases in 2023. In fact, coming down to 6 by the end of 2023 is a major victory of various governments across the world. But there's one more thing the article says. The article says that this success has not been possible because of technical or high-end technical innovations in medical science. Now today we talk about high-end innovations. We talk about artificial intelligence that is being used in the healthcare, better quality vaccine research and mRNA technique, which enables us to create customized vaccines for various diseases. We are not talking about any such high sophisticated technology. Back then, there was no such technology. But still the world saw success. Why? Because ultimately the success behind fighting a disease, eliminating a disease, is less about high-end technologies. It is more about basics like community hygiene, intersectoral cooperation, and community participation, and that has enabled people to come out of the clutches of this disease. People also said that it is because governments in poor Asian countries created awareness regarding cleaning water bodies, lack of typical habits of storing unclean water for long period of time, hygiene, clean sanitation, adolescent sanitation. It is because of this that people have been able to recover from such a huge health menace. Also, let's remember that India had eradicated, abandoned, abolished the GWD or the Guinea worm disease back in 1990s, and it got a certificate for being Guinea worm disease free only in 2000s. Now let's remember this is caused by a parasite, and this parasite is an organism which actually enters human skin and then it grows there. Sometimes the worm is able to grow up to centimeters long and it creates blisters in the skin. It's a very painful disease which manifests in secondary infections like fever or sometimes other kind of bacterial infestation apart from this parasite. And then often the treatment is nothing. It takes 1 year for the victim to show symptoms. Once the victim is critically ill, the blister can be torn and a full-length worm can be pulled out. So it's a very, very gruesome disease actually which affects people, leads to uncontrolled bleeding, hemorrhage and many other complications too. Typically impacts the poor communities who do not have access to clean drinking water. Now let's remember that 15 cases of Guinea worm disease were reported back in 2021, and the sad part is that even today they are concentrated in typically the poor countries of Chad, Ethiopia, South Sudan and Mali, now experiencing a high-grade humanitarian crisis. Conflicts, coups, poverty is an automatic side effect, which means that the lack of clean drinking water is a natural, it's a very automated impact of the political instability in these areas. And hence, today, it is a huge round of applause that the world deserves for having beaten this disease. It could also serve as a future more model. Today, when we are dealing with unknown kind of diseases, now the World Health Organization is warning us against disease X. a future pandemic that could be more critical and more morbid. So community hygiene and community health could go long run in tackling these problems. They can be very preventive in nature. And then to the last article of the day, page 14, it talks about a development in the field of science and technology. It says rupees 19,000 crore has been allocated to Navy for buying BrahMos missiles and machinery. Now, this is a very interesting piece of news because it will boost India's naval capacity like never before. So, what is BrahMos? Now, BrahMos Aerospace Private Limited is a joint venture between India and Russia. Let's remember it is behind creating very, very fast, swift, supersonic missiles that can be launched from submarine, ships, aircraft, even land platforms. These missiles travel at a speed that's 2.8 times faster than that of the speed of sound. That's why supersonic. Now, in a very significant development, the Cabinet Committee on Security has allowed for procuring, buying more than 200 BrahMos supersonic missiles to be used by Indian Navy, a major naval boost, and they will be deployed in various Indian naval warships to further improve the attacking or combating capacities of Indian Navy. Therefore, it means that acquisition will be done of BrahMos missiles which have a range of about 290 kilometers up to 450 kilometers in total. Now let's remember, Indian Navy is not the only customer that has been rewarded with this kind of a huge, you can say, boost. In fact, back in 2022, India had closed another deal with Philippines. Now, this is very interesting that Philippines became the first global customer of the batteries of the BrahMos missiles. Similarly, many other countries, including Argentina, they have also been raising demands to be able to procure BrahMos from India. So, therefore, this development of Indian Navy getting access to this huge missile power comes in the wake of already ongoing geopolitical threat from China in the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. So this could mean further self-defense and a much better security mechanism in the case of today's geopolitical instability in this Southeast Asian area. And now let's quickly see the practice questions for mains. The first question is in reference to ASHA workers. It says ASHA workers continue to experience critical challenges because they are treated as informal employees. We just discussed in the article how they are the ghost employees, how they are standing at a crossroad where they are not designated health workers and yet they perform more duties than any health worker in India. So discuss some of these problems and you can talk about the triple burden. You can talk about the fact that they are ghost employees, lack of access to healthcare, poor salary, economic violence as we spoke about that. You could mention the gender-based and caste-based violence. You could talk about the fact that how today they are experiencing health crisis and all of that. The second question says, how will Agniveer scheme change the structure and management of defense forces? Will it do that in fact? Discuss few problems associated with this initiative. So clearly you need to describe the scheme first with the reason. Why was it introduced in the first place? As we discussed, the huge gap that was created because of lack of recruitment in military during the COVID pandemic, and then you go on to explain the 2022 Agniveer scheme, how it is a contractual scheme. It's a scheme where people are recruited for specifically just a few years. What benefits will they get upon getting relieved from service? What are some other features of the scheme? Now, indeed, it is bringing a structural change because it is boosting manpower for military. It is giving employment opportunities. It is creating patriotism. That's amazing. But the problem is that there are certain discrepancies in the scheme. The challenges really are how people are commenting that it is kind of making military services come in the form of employment guarantee scheme. Now, military cannot be boiled down to employment guarantee schemes. That is very objectification of something as huge as military services. They are a commitment, not a job per se. Plus, the contractual nature is further demotivating people to join. The third thing is the fact that people are becoming competitive could be a problem in solidarity and unity. And the fact that it is a break in the career for many, it's not the conventional route of getting recruited, that is also subject to criticism. And in that way, we can address the question. Now with this, I take your leave on today's session. See you very soon with another exciting session. In the meantime, thank you so much.